everybody, Trevor here, and it's time for another top 5 video. And as promised, we'll be talking about my top 5 favorite gaming franchises of all time. One of the many things I love about being a gamer is to escape from reality into fantasy by playing video games. And when it comes to those things, I like to keep up with the times by buying new consoles just to play certain games. And when I was a kid, I mostly grew up with the PlayStation consoles such as the PS1, PS2, and PS3, as well as certain handheld ones such as those developed by Nintendo, like the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advanced. However, when it comes to high quality gaming, graphics, and gameplay, I usually prefer most of the games in today's generation, such as certain remakes of classic games, as well as something that's entirely new to the franchise. And while, yes, no game is perfect whether in the past, present, or future, but normally, I like to keep up with the current times when it comes to video games in general. Now for this list, I'm only going to include those that I grew up with as a kid and teenager, so I won't be including any mature games such as Assassin's Creed, the Uncharted series, or any of the Final Fantasy games. Now with those things out of the way, let's begin, shall we? Coming at number 5 is Frogger for the PS1. This game is about a little green frog who wants to cross the street to reach his goals, but has to watch out for many obstacles including oncoming vehicles and dangerous animals. I was originally going to make this as number 4, but I placed it on the number 5 spot instead, mainly because it's quite an obscure franchise, and doesn't get as much attention as Mario, Sonic, or even Crash Bandicoot for that matter. And not to mention that the Frogger games can be really difficult in terms of gameplay. But with enough practice, trial, and error, they can be beaten in no time. That's what's usually fun about a difficult game like Frogger. Another thing I love about the 1997 Frogger game is the catchy hip hop music, which I thought made the game quite interesting and entertaining. There was also a sequel to the 1997 remake known as Frogger 2 Swampy's Revenge, which I did enjoy, but it's not as good as the first one in terms of music and graphics. But at least it has an original storyline with Swampy the crocodile being a bad guy who kidnaps all of these baby frogs and Frogger and Lily had to save them. Aside from Frogger's faults, I still enjoyed this series, particularly the first two games on the PS1. They weren't perfect, but they're more fun and enjoyable compared to certain games like Action 52 or any of the Barbie games on the PS1. It's too bad that Frogger has faded into obscurity nowadays. Number 4 is a tie between Mario Kart and the Yoshi games. I was first introduced to these at my uncle's farmhouse where two of my cousins live. They were kind enough to share their Nintendo 64 with me and my friends. Not only did they have Mario games, but also Yoshi's Story, which was another one of my favorites at the time because of the cute and charming characters. Anyways, one of the best things about the Mario Kart franchise is that every sequel gets better and better with more options like playable characters, as well as customizing your kart, just like in Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, which I'll talk about more about later. Even though I love most of the Mario characters, but my most favorite character to play was Yoshi himself because as I've said before, he's cute, charming, and adorable. Speaking of Yoshi, let's talk about Yoshi's Story next. While I never finished the game as a kid, I was thankful enough to give it an honest chance even though there were some annoying obstacles in the way, like this elephant character who keeps blocking your way. Yeah, I wasn't the best gamer back in my youth. I also enjoyed the overall storyline where Yoshi and his friends had to retrieve the Super Happy Tree from the evil baby Bowser, who was the main antagonist of this game. But the most memorable thing about Yoshi's Story is the sweet sounding soundtrack, especially the main menu theme, as well as Baby Bowser's Lullaby, which sounds a lot like Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy from the Nutcracker Ballet. Last Christmas, my sister bought me Yoshi's Crafted World on the Nintendo Switch, which I thought was a pretty great sequel to the original because of the creative cardboard cutout backgrounds, as well as a new storyline where the Yoshis had to retrieve all the gem pieces of the Sun Dream Stone from Baby Bowser and his magician sidekick, Kamek. Even though I haven't beaten the game yet, but I'm working on it. It's an overall fun game. You should give it a try someday. While I never owned a Nintendo 64 or any of the other bigger Nintendo consoles as a child, but I'm very thankful to have Mario Kart and Yoshi's Story as part of my childhood because without them, I wouldn't know how to play racing games in general, nor would I have experienced a cuter and more adorable video game like Yoshi's Story. Number 3, Spyro the Dragon. This fantasy series is one of my favorite PS1 games growing up besides Frogger. It is about a little purple dragon who goes on epic adventures with his friends and stops evildoers from conquering the world, including Nasty Nork, Ripto, and the Sorceress, who were the first three antagonists of the original trilogy. Not only do I like the characters, including Spyro himself, who is currently voiced by Tom Kenny, but I love the memorable music, including the Wizard's Peak track, which does remind me of the Amanda Show's theme instrumental quite a lot. While I never played the original third game on the PS1 as a kid, but thankfully, I was able to experience the remake on the PS4 along with the other two games in the Reignited trilogy, which I would recommend for all first time players if they want to experience Spyro the Dragon. However, the worst eras for Spyro, in my opinion, are the PS2 and Skylanders eras, because for one thing, Skylanders barely has anything to do with the original Spyro source material whatsoever. Secondly, the absolute worst PS2 Spyro game in my entire life would have to be Enter the Dragonflight due to its plot holes, bad and rushed gameplay, and terrible glitches. It's about as bad as some of the PS2 Crash games, even at the time. Yeah, most PS2 games age like milk in my eyes when it comes to graphics and gameplay. As for the Legend of Spyro series, well, it's okay for the most part. While I did enjoy the voice acting, especially Elijah Wood as Spyro and Gary Oldman as Ignitus, but I'm a little 50-50 on the redesigns because some like Sparks look very odd in my opinion. But it's still better than Skylanders because Spyro's new look in that one looked even worse than before. I mean, he looks like a pug, but uglier. But aside from those things, I'm still nostalgic for the first two Spyro games as well as the Reignited trilogy. And here's hoping that the next Spyro game will be a huge improvement over Enter the Dragonfly, because that game does not deserve to be acknowledged nor canon. Number 2, Crash Bandicoot. Another one of my favorite PS1 games growing up, along with the second and third games. This awesome series is about a bandicoot named Crash, who was originally an experiment created by the evil Dr. Cortex and was originally part of his plan for world domination. But when the experiment failed, he escapes the castle and has to go back to save his girlfriend Tana Bandicoot. But this was from the first installment, which was one of my favorites along with the second and third games, as I've said before. In other words, nothing beats the original trilogy, nor the first Crash Team Racing game in my humble opinion. I'm so thankful that these four games were remade in HD for the PlayStation 4. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to relive my childhood. Another thing I love about the Insane trilogy is not only that the remakes stayed true to the originals, but they also add some new additions to make them even better than before, like making Coco Bandicoot playable in the entire Insane trilogy, as well as adding some time trials in the first two remakes. Not to mention that the Stormy Ascent level, which was cut from the original Crash 1 game, was later reused as a downloadable content level. However, it's a very hard level, which was why it was cut in the first place. But there are other good Crash games too, including Crash Twinsanity, which was my favorite of the PS2 era despite the glitches and plot holes, as well as Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time on the PS4 despite its very irritating difficulty. But thankfully, there is a merciful mode where you can die as many times as you want without a game over screen. Crash Team Rumble was okay, but not as good as the last few games on the PS4 because what I didn't realize at first was that in order to play this game, I had to subscribe to PlayStation Plus, which sucks because normally I like to play games that are offline and not on the internet. Otherwise, I could get my personal information stolen, or maybe even get swatted, which is a worst case scenario because I don't want anything bad happening to me or my family. But aside from those things, the best eras for Crash Bandicoot, in my opinion, are the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 4 eras for the most part, even though the PS2 era was so-so, but with some duds here and there. Still, I recommend you experience the Insane Trilogy, as well as Natural Field if you want to have your first fun experience with Crash Bandicoot. Trust me, they're worth your time and money. Before I get to my number one pick, I just want to give a bunch of honorable mentions. Pokemon. To a certain degree, I still kind of like Pokemon, particularly the games, but the reason it didn't make it is because I'm slowly growing out of the franchise, including the anime. And I'm sort of getting tired of keeping up with the franchise for the most part, so chances are I might not get myself a Nintendo Switch 2 anytime soon just to give the future generations an honest chance. Donkey Kong. It would have been number 4 on the list. While it is a beautifully made series, but unfortunately, I mostly grew up with the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance versions of Donkey Kong Country. But hey, at least I was able to watch some of the gameplay on YouTube. I also grew up with the 3DS version of Donkey Kong Country Returns, during my college years, that is. I might get the Nintendo Switch version of Tropical Freeze someday, but no promises, okay? Ratchet and Clank. I've honestly never played any of these games in my entire life, so therefore I have no opinion on the franchise. Jak and Daxter. The only games I've ever played were the first two, so that's why they didn't make it on here. The Legend of Zelda franchise. Like Ratchet and Clank, I've never played any of these games either, but from what I saw on YouTube, the graphics have improved a lot since Breath of the Wild, and even the new voice acting was spot on, especially Zelda's new voice actress, who made her sound beautiful and elegant. Sonic the Hedgehog. I decided not to include it because, for one thing, I'm terrible at Sonic games in general because of the fast paced gameplay and challenges. Secondly, I'm not a Sonic fan anymore, not because I don't like the franchise now, but because of the annoying fanbase who like to bitch and moan about every single solitary thing about the modern Sonic games, especially the modern designs. Yeah, that's why I gave up on the franchise. And my number one most favorite video gaming franchise of all time is obviously Kingdom Hearts. There are so many reasons why this is on the number one slot. For one thing, I love the fantasy violence, the epic orchestrated music by Yoko Shimomura, some of the English voice acting, especially Sora's, beautiful 3D graphics, the exciting and easy gameplay, if you don't count the optional challenges, of course, the wonderful and memorable characters, including Master Xehanort, and most especially, the overall confusing yet very consistent storyline for each installment. While yes, it is confusing, and I totally understand why, but like I just said, at least the overall storyline and lore is consistent. In fact, the director Tetsuya Nomura knew what he was doing. He knew how to direct an awesome gaming franchise like Kingdom Hearts, and he and the team did their very best to put their heart, soul, and mind into the series, unlike how Disney does with Star Wars and Marvel nowadays. Looking at you, Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger. Seriously though, let's hope Disney doesn't ruin the Kingdom Hearts franchise like they did to their other properties. Otherwise, I'm totally done with them. Also, I've heard they're going to make a live action slash CGI hybrid Kingdom Hearts movie, which I don't really have high hopes for because it might have the same exact problems as the other Disney live action remakes. Anyways, back to the Kingdom Hearts games. If you've been following me for a very long time now, then chances are you might realize that not only that I'm a Thomas fan, but a huge Kingdom Hearts fan as well. I've made several top videos regarding my favorite characters, ideas for worlds, etc. I'll provide links in the description below in case you want to check them out. But the biggest reason why Kingdom Hearts is number one is because this gaming franchise helped me remain a loyal fan of Disney to begin with. I mean, without it, I wouldn't have been a loyal fan of not only Disney, but modern games in general. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to defend modern Disney in general, nor their political agenda. I'm just saying that Kingdom Hearts is one of the only few saving graces along with Pixar. Oh, and I can't wait to see Inside Out 2 this month, which I hope will save Pixar from bombing again, which I doubt. All in all, Kingdom Hearts is not only my favorite franchise from Japan, but my most favorite thing about Disney in general because of these reasons alone. And here's hoping that the Jungle Book world will appear in the series as a world one day because it's long overdue. Now let me know in the comment section below on which of these gaming franchises are your favorite. Do you agree with my list, or do you have your own personal preference? And if you're not into video games, then that's fine. But for me, I'll always keep up with the times when it comes to certain games like Kingdom Hearts and Crash Bandicoot because those are two of my favorites growing up. This is Trevor Davis signing off and have a great day.